Good afternoon. Can we please start? Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues. Welcome to this fourth learning session of the Multilateral Industrial Policy Forum. My name is Fernando Cantú. I am the Chief Statistician of UNIDO, and it's my great pleasure to be moderating this session. I have been following the other sessions online as well, and there has been great discussion, and I hope this can continue in this fourth and last session of the day. As you know, our idea is really to provide a forum for a dialogue, a space where we can learn from the experience of different countries and different areas of work, and try to make it work to promote industrial policy throughout the world. In this specific session, we're going to focus on gender and industrial policy, which is a very, very important topic. So important that I think out of the four sessions, we think this deserves its own discussion. There has been study after study showing how gender equality and the empowerment of women can help countries to achieve more prosperous societies, but also specifically on innovation, on industry, to be more innovative, more sustainable, and reach a more sustained growth. However, even to this day, we still see that women are underrepresented in manufacturing employment. They are underrepresented in terms specifically and especially in those sectors where innovation and technology play a greater role. They're underrepresented as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as in leadership positions. So throughout the whole scale of industrial activity, women are underrepresented. And unfortunately, there has not been a lot of progress over the last years or decades. And this is especially worrisome now because, as was discussed in the previous sessions, there are a lot of changes in the sector. There's the forces of digitalization, of new advanced technologies, of green industry, that risk creating even more unequal circumstances for the participation of women. So I hope in this session we can learn a bit more from the experience of countries, from studies, and try to bring it all together into some guidelines or some ideas on how we can promote gender equality in industry. So to get us started, I would like to invite Ms. Fatou Haidara, the Deputy to the Director General of UNIDO and our Managing Director of the Directorate of Global Partnerships and External Relations, to give us some opening remarks for the session.
Thank you, Fernando. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm very happy to be here to provide the opening remarks for this very important session. Gender equality and the empowerment of women are amongst the highest level organizational priorities for UNIDO. They are central drivers of transformative change and fundamental to achieving SDG 9, which is to build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. The combined effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, the climate emergency, rising cost of living, armed conflict, and displacement have put a halt to years of sustained progress on gender equality. According to the World Economic Forum, closing the global gender gap will take now 132 years instead of previously planned only 100 years. This represents a generational loss, and this occurred in the space of only 2 years. Just to say that progress is very fragile. Within industry, gender inequalities persist. Fernando mentioned some of them. It's good to repeat these facts. Currently, women account for about only 38% of the industrial workforce. They earn lower wages on average, hold only a fraction of technical and managerial jobs, and are underrepresented in the sectors of the future, notably the sectors that require digital and technical skills and have higher average wages. Also, women-led micro, small, and medium enterprises dispose of less capital than businesses owned by men. This gender finance gap widens with the size of the business. It is therefore our duty to support women's participation in industry as employees, as entrepreneurs, as decision makers, and as stakeholders. In other words, we must create an enabling environment to harness women's potential in order to achieve inclusive and sustainable industrialization and the SDGs. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, industrial policies and strategies often do not take into account the need and priorities of women. For example, only less than 1/3 of national energy frameworks include gender considerations. And among those frameworks that do, women are seldom considered as agents of change. To advance inclusive and sustainable industrial development, industrial policies need to contribute to women's economic empowerment, address women's different needs, priorities, and access to resources, consider women as active contributors to the process of sustainable industrialization, and transform existing social norms and behavior. The objective of today's session is to illustrate the opportunities and challenges in adding a gender lens to industrial policy making. I look forward to hearing compelling examples, lessons learned, and good practices for this approach. There is still a long way ahead to make gender equality and women's empowerment a lived reality. I hope that the discussions during this session will help us take a small step, but down to the right path. So I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Haidara, for these opening remarks. So now we will get started with the discussion. As in the previous sessions, we will divide it into two parts. First, we will have an introductory or triggering presentation to set the scene, to give us some background, to highlight the main issues. And then after that, we will move to a panel discussion with 4 distinguished panelists that we have gracefully accepted to participate. So let's start with the introductory presentation. This will be given by my colleague, Ms. Cecilia Ugas Estrada. She's the director of the Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women unit at UNIDO. Cecilia.
Good afternoon, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real great pleasure to be with you this afternoon. Allow me to stand up, because if I stay sitting down, I think we all feel a little bit tired, and it's normal because it's already 4:30, and I've seen most of you have been really sort of participating very actively during the full day of today's forum. So I had a presentation that I was going to read, but I think I prefer to just explain a little bit what are the messages that I think are important to sort of get from this session on gender equality and the role of industrial policy. The first thing I wanted to refer to you to is like the fact that our EAP and our industrial analytics platform, there is an article, very interesting one, that is talking about the industrial policy revival and how there is increased attention on the side of policymakers to make and do better industrial policy. So for me, that is a very interesting starting point, because I think this is now more than ever that we definitely need to make sure that the benefits of industrialization really reach men and women in equal ways. We need to really be able to generate equal opportunities for both men and women. And let's use this opportunity that now gender in industrial policy is really coming back from the archives in order to be able to influence that, with these considerations about gender equality. I think, it is, I'm going to start by saying things that you probably know. And then I'm going to start, because sometimes I'm really surprised by the numbers, by the sheer numbers, and how the representation of women is in industry in general, all sectors, across all sectors. And then I'm going to try to make the case why, gender transformative industrial policy is important. And then also reflect upon a little bit, just as a opening for what is going to come later in terms of the panel discussion, what are the challenges and what are the opportunities to be able to do gender transformative industrial policies. So the first one is, like, as my colleagues, Fatou and Fernando, and I'm sure you have heard this before, we tend to talk about, how, women employment in manufacturing is only 38%. Yeah? This, of course, hides a huge disparity among sectors, but in particular, the fact that women are really concentrated on low technological intensity sectors. For instance, in leather, apparel, textiles, women are 77% of the employees. What happened with these sectors? These sectors tend to have less technological advancement and, for the same token, offer lower wages and more precarious job conditions. And most of this employment is sometimes informal. So this is a fact. The other fact that we know also is that women are underrepresented on more intensively, technological sectors. This is also something that is really documented in the literature. Another fact that I think is very important is in terms of leadership. The latest report from the World Economic Forum on the gender gap really highlights the fact that, for instance, women leaders in industry only reach 19%. In the energy sector, there are 20%. In infrastructure, there are 16%. This is much lower than the average that we have for chair women leaders in the overall economy, which is around 30%. Not great, not high, but at least the sectors that we're focusing on really have a deficit in terms of women leadership and also women in managerial positions, and it's quite a sensible gap. The other thing when it comes to business and entrepreneurship by women, this is also probably something that you know about. Women are basically majority owners of less than 15% of businesses worldwide. Less than 15% of businesses. Women, especially in emerging countries, only receive 8% of venture capital. In general, the businesses that are run by women are small and they have higher financial gaps. What is very important to highlight also is the studies that are being produced currently. They really show that this is not due to lack of technical capacity, lower levels of education. This is sometimes, really most of the time, due to the fact that there are very, very restrictive social norms and even unconscious gender biases. So when you are a woman and a small entrepreneur and go to apply for a credit, it is likely that you are not going to get it. And it is not because your file is not good. It is not because you are not a good manager, it's simply because you are a woman. And this is the reality, and this is the way, the world is turning around. I think also other studies that UNIDO has done, and also the International Financial Corporation, shows that business as usual will not help to close the gender gap in industry. So this is something that we also need to keep in mind. We cannot continue the way we are going because this is going to get worse, especially with 4AR, with new technologies and things that really transforming, some parts of the economy and not necessarily taking out women from these kind of sectors. The other thing that is, I think, quite important to remember, and this is not new, when we study a little bit the process of industrialization around the world, we see that basically in past decades, in the countries that are currently what we call early industrializers, the process of industrialization meant that at the beginning of the process, women were absorbed by industry, especially in low qualified jobs. But increasingly, as the economy evolved and the countries were able to provide more knowledge products and become more dignified, then it happens what is called the defeminization of industrialization. But this means lowering the rate of participation in employment in industry. So, why is this important and what is the role of industrial policy in all this? I think, as you probably know, industrial policy is really a collection of, different instruments and also having a big realm in terms of applicability. We talk about, industrial policies really affecting labor markets, capital markets, financial markets, and you name it. So I think it would be interesting maybe to see in which ways, what are the challenges by which industrial policy can really affect, or at least sort of try to make a more, I would say, level playing field for women and men. For instance, in terms of labor markets, this could be by providing opportunities for women to access more qualified, better paying jobs through the enrollment in training institutes or industry-specific skills, or being able to join work-based experience and technical cooperation programs. When we talk about product markets, by guaranteeing market for domestic suppliers, women are currently underrepresented as public suppliers. It is calculated that women entrepreneurs have been awarded only 1% of government procurement around the world. Only 1%. And this is a very important thing to do, because definitely if you have women entrepreneurs that are really trying to get some size of the market, one possibility could be precisely influencing this through public procurement. In capital markets, I think this is also a case that is very well established. It is by supporting small and medium-sized enterprises that employ 50% of women or are run or owned by women through access to grants, credits, and financial collaterals. The lack of collaterals and lack of guarantees is one of the most important reasons why women business tend to be smaller and tend to be over-indebted. So, I mean, why is that gender transformative industrial policies are important then? I think that besides the intrinsic argument, that gender equality is good in itself, because this means basically giving equal opportunities to 50% of the world population. So I think this is enough of a good argument. But there are other three arguments that I think, and I will sort of submit for your consideration, that I think are also important. The first one is that gender transformative industrial policies can support better economic performance. There is a wider range of studies that highlights the benefits of gender equality and diversity for profitability, sustainability, and the level of innovation in business. The second reason, which I think is also important, is to support the change in social norms. As we all know, social norms are really entrenched. I mean, they are very restrictive. They really put men and girls, boys and girls, into certain kind of activities that you can do and you cannot do. And industrial policy, by trying to give room to women to participate in so-called unconventional sectors, will make an enormous good for the whole society. I think one important thing to also realize is that these gender norms are also dynamic. So it is, all sectors that sort of, are basically superseded because of technological progress, and in which gender roles were very, very strictly defined, are actually being sort of discarded. But, the prejudice and also the discrimination will attribute, again, to men and women certain roles by which women will also, again, be precluded from profiting and benefiting more from industrial development. The third reason, which I think is very important for all of us, because if we are here, is because we care about technical cooperation, we care about development, is the fact that gender transformative industrial policies can support the effectiveness and sustainability of technical cooperation programs and interventions to be really transformative. What does I mean to that? In 2022, 41% of UNIDO projects, all projects in the house, were classified as having an important contribution to gender equality. 77% of projects that were approved in the energy sector were classified as having an important contribution to gender equality. So our energy colleagues are really our gender champions in the house. It is a very, very important achievement, actually. Nevertheless, well, we have, we talk about a lot about the Global Quality and Standards Program, we talk about the Clean Tech and Innovation Program, we talk about the PIWI project, the Promoting Gender Empowerment in the MENA region, we talk about the Learning and Knowledge Development Facility. All of these programs of UNIDO have very interesting gender mainstreaming tools and also results. Nevertheless, what happens? We need to have sustainability. And we will never reach sustainability unless we really are able to permeate into the construction of policies and norms. Because otherwise, once our projects are finished, it's very difficult to keep the results. And I think this is a very important reason why we have to advocate for better, gender transformative industrial policies. So just a second, because the organizers will give me. If this is so important, why is it that we don't do it? Right? And I think this is the million question. And I'm sure you are going to be able to relate to this question while you listen to our panelists, invited panelists, because they will be describing the challenges and opportunities to trying to do gender mainstreaming in industrial policy. But just let me recap mentioning one. We need gender disaggregated data. We have argued as development community for years that we need to have information-based policy making. And how can we do, gender mainstreaming in industrial policies if we are not able to measure the gender gap properly? So I think this is a very, very important point that we definitely also need to support increasingly our member states to be able to report our indicators of the SDG 9, of which UNIDO is custodian, in terms of gender disaggregation. So I would like just to conclude with this. I just would like to ask you, please, let's don't miss the opportunity that industrial policy is making a revival. We need industrial policy in order to make this green transition sustainable and inclusive. Let's remember, we really have to fight to leave no one behind, and I think this is a very, very important point that we can really stress. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, for this great introduction and for reminding us that business as usual cannot be accepted anymore, and that there is a very important role to play from industrial policy, especially what you call gender transformative in industrial policy. And of course, as a statistician, I cannot but support your call for better data so we can really track what's happening and we can be able to guide this industrial policy. So let's move now to the second part, the panel discussion. We have 4 experts from different backgrounds, from different corners of the world that will share with us their experience in implementing these industrial, gender-sensitive, gender-transformative industrial policies in their own fields. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from their experience. I will introduce the 4 experts we will have in the panel. First, we have Ms. Cristina Ollón. She's the Director of Technology, Innovation and Sustainability at the Esprit Group, which is the business development agency of the Basque Country, one of the autonomous communities in Spain. As part of her role, she is in charge for the design and implementation of technology and industrial development strategies, which of course include gender-sensitive policies. Next, we also have Ms. Annelien Chetty, the Chief Operations Officer of the National Department of Trade and Industry of South Africa. Her experience focuses on creating jobs and developing opportunities across industry and commerce sectors for economic growth, but also for creating opportunities and improving people's lives. Next, here in the room, we have Ms. Jennifer Castañeda Navarrete. She's a senior policy analyst at IFM Engage, which is part of the Institute for Manufacturing at the University of Cambridge. She has 15 years of experience in policy analysis as an academic, but also as a policy practitioner in the context of developing and developed countries. And finally, last but not least, we are pleased to have the participation of Ms. Chu-Young Park, Associate Professor at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the Seoul National University. Her work focuses on exploring circular economy strategies and their effect for industrial clusters, water infrastructure, and urban built environments. So I will be asking our panelists a set of questions, and I would like to ask them to please keep their questions to about 5 minutes. We will have at least 2 rounds, and then depending on any questions we receive, we can follow up with more information. So I would like to start with Ms. Cristina Ollón. You as I mentioned, you're director at the SPRI Group, which is the Basque Business Development Agency, who is in charge of promoting industry in the Basque Country. Over the past year, the SPRI Group has significantly increased its work on gender equality and the empowerment of women. For example, the work of SPRI Group included conducting a study that, also alluding to what Cecilia was mentioning, demonstrated that a higher index of diversity and equality also led to greater economic competitiveness of industrial sectors. What were the underlying policy developments that facilitated this important work? And how did your work contribute to advancing gender equality and the empowerment of women in the business sector? Please, Cristina. Cristina, you are muted. We cannot hear you. Okay, while we try to solve the issue, let's move to our second panelist, Ms. Annelise Chetty. Ms. Chetty, in last year, South Africa's, or 2 years ago, 2021, South Africa's green industrial policies were evaluated from a gender equality and feminist policy point of view. Could you please tell us about this initiative and especially how this contributed to empowering more women to take leadership roles and participate in green industry as entrepreneurs and industry professionals?
Good afternoon, everyone. From a very sunny South Africa, it's an absolute privilege to share this platform with you from the other end of the world. And thank you, UNIDO, for this wonderful opportunity. Yes, South Africa was very fortunate to participate in the EWG project, which is the economic empowerment of women in the green economy, which was funded by UNIDO. It involved 4 different countries, South Africa, Cambodia, Senegal, and Peru, where our various policies were analyzed from a gender mainstreaming perspective, and to see the extent to which we are gender responsive, and more particularly within the green economy. Just to contextualize for our colleagues from around the world, whilst we all struggled from the COVID pandemic in the last few years around the world, South Africa has added burdens, pandemics, and crises, one of which is GBV, which is gender-based violence, coupled with a lack of economic empowerment of women. In addition, a second pandemic or crisis, which that's how I would like to refer to it as, is our serious energy shortage, which impacts significantly on the productivity of industry. So both these areas were very significant, and the project itself allowed us to focus on these two areas, and more importantly, integrating and attempting to integrate these two different areas of crises. So effectively, we were looking at a specific gender mainstream policy for the green industry, outlining how women can be economically empowered in the green industry. So the green industry is largely a male-dominated environment in South Africa, and therefore attempting to bring these two areas together presented quite a challenge. However, I am quite happy to say that despite the challenge, we were able to make some significant success and achieve some positive areas. So through the empowerment and the enlightenment and capacity building that we received from this project, we embraced the significance of the green industry in South Africa, increasing the amount of resources that we've directed at it. We've also recognized how important it is to allow women-owned businesses to participate in this important industry. Together with UN Women, we've held many capacity building programs, focusing not on just increasing the understanding of gender responsive budgeting, but also increasing the understanding of the green economy, which is a relatively new and emerging sector within South Africa. And bringing all of these sectors together, as I've already indicated, was quite challenging. However, we've made some significant strides. Some of which, but is not all inclusive, is that South Africa now has created a dedicated energy office. And we're hoping that we start to ensure that that office is capacitated with women, and the whole element of gender mainstreaming is incorporated in there. More so, South Africa has created tax incentives for citizens to start using alternative forms of energy. They've also created incentives for women-owned businesses to increase their participation in the green economy. So these have been some of the positive outcomes that have come out of our participation and involvement in this UNIDO program. It is not all inclusive. There are a number of other areas. As I say, it was cross-cutting. We involved all different departments in government, as well as different parts of the private sector, as well as civil society. So these were some of the positive elements that came out of that study and that initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chetty, for this sharing your the experience of these policies in South Africa. And I think it's great to hear how the different areas are interlinked and reinforce each other. In this case, energy, sustainability, and gender mainstreaming as well. So from the noises I'm hearing, I guess Christina now, her audio is now working. So I will move to you, Christina. Could you hear the question you want me to repeat?
Yes, no, thank you. Can you hear to me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this session. And I'm sorry, I don't know what was happening, but it's a pity that I cannot be with you there. And finally, we can manage the connection. So yes, I remember the question. And first of all, well, I would like to take this opportunity to show to you some of the results of this analysis that we have developed recently, and I will try to summarize the work of a group of experts, 25 persons from all over the world, that we have been working during the last 3 years trying to develop these ideas for, as Cecilia said, gender transformative industrial policies. By the way, Cecilia is one of the members of this group, and I have to stop 1 second to thank her for their continued support and valuable contributions. If you can put the slides that I sent, yes, it's going to be a very brief presentation, and I will try to show you how this analysis that we have been developing is very much related with the way that we really believe industrial policy should move forward. So as I said in the previous, in the next slide, yes, starting from this comment that Cecilia mentioned in her intervention, and as this idea as a starting point that for many reasons, gender equality is no longer a fundamental question of human rights, but it's really needed to ensure competitiveness and economic recovery. From this point, this group of experts have been working lately in trying to demonstrate this idea that also Cecilia mentioned, related to how to make a correlation between these ideas, gender equality in industrial activity and competitiveness. So in the next slide, you can see how we have developed we have developed a test case in the Basque Country. The Basque Country is a small region in the north of Spain that shows very well, it's very representative of the industrial situation and women's situation in industry. We are an industrial region, 2.2 million people, and from these 2.2 million people, 44% of employed women, but only 21% of women employed in industry. So it's also an area where we are trying to focus in high added value industrial activity, and this is the reason why also we are very interested in linking this concept of gender equality, because we are moving towards a new industrial policy which makes company create value, but not only economic value as before, but also environmental and social value. So if we really want to move towards this kind of industrial model, for many years in the Basque Country, we have had an industrial policy very much based in technology and innovation. But it's no longer enough to leverage the industrial policy in technology and innovation. We really need also technology, innovation, sustainability, and talent. And to we need to address the untapped pool of talent that we women could provide the industrial activity. So with this idea in mind, we promote this test case, or this case study case, and we develop a methodology. In the next slide, please. I will go very quickly. Just, in the next slide, you can see, I don't know, yes, we have made a survey to more than 2,000 companies, industrial or industry-related services companies headquartered in the Basque Country that are working in areas that demonstrate this high added value activity in research and development, internationalization. So we have defined two indexes, one related to gender equality and other one related to industrial competitiveness, and we have crossed and analyzed the relationship between these two indexes. In the next slide, you can see how there is a trend. We can see how in this trend most egalitarian companies score the best results in the competitiveness index in average, while the less egalitarian companies score the worst results in the competitiveness index in average. So we have also in the next slide, you can show how the other way around also states this trend. So the most competitive companies score the best results in the competitiveness index in average, while the less competitive companies score the worst results in the competitiveness index in average. We are developing this methodology, and we wanted to test the case in order to support these studies, these international studies and analysis that said that gender equality has a lot to do with the competitiveness of the companies, but also we want to have this as a way to introduce in our industrial policy the idea towards the companies, the industrial companies, that they need to make themselves attractive for women because they need talent, and also because it's going to pay the way. They are going to be more competitive if they incorporate gender equality. So this is in the next slide we have some conclusions, but I think that more or less I have covered all of them. And well, this is the idea. As I said, this would like to use this as a motivational tool for the implementation of equality policies, or what, as Cecilia said, for the implementation of gender transformative industrial policies. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to keep on answering the questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Cristina. If I can ask a very quick follow-up question, because you mentioned that there were these industrial policies in place that were already promoting gender equality in industry. Could you maybe give us a bit more details of these policies that were implemented in your government?
Well, we are now developing, or as I said, we have been working in the definition and implementation of industrial policy very much based in technology and innovation during the last 40 years of the government of the Basque Country. And now I would say that we have made an evolution also internally in the way that we are promoting or defining also and working with companies in the definition and implementation of these industrial policies. In the first hand, we are mostly or trying to work always in public-private collaboration schemes, and we are, again, as I said, trying to move towards a more comprehensive policies that try to make companies aware that they need to create value, not only for economic, but also for the environment and the society. And in this part of making value for the society, it's where the relevance of incorporating women on industrial activity is taking a relevant position in the definition of the policy of the policies. We have been addressing how to connect the incorporation of women in the companies, and it's clear that we have found areas such as the access of women to the companies, which are really difficult for women, but also how to thrive in the industrial activity, and finally the leadership in industrial companies, which is really very difficult. So from this data that have been put forward in the previous interventions, it's true that 38% or around 30% of workforce in the industry are composed by women, but this percentage is more realistic in the junior positions. In senior positions is only 20%, and in leadership positions is 9%. So it's clear that in the access case, mostly in high added value industrial activity, the case of STEM, there are not enough girls in STEM studies. This is one of the showstoppers. And also we are seeing how in the case of thriving, we have to make companies, as I said, more attractive for women. We see that the industrial world is a world made for men, by men for men, and this is something that has to change. And companies need to understand that that when they say that they don't find women to hire, they need to put forward measures to make the industrial activity more attractive. So these kind of things are also part of the development and implementation of the industrial policy, these conversations between the private and public activities that we are defining in the Basque country are part of this new way of this transformative policy into an industrial model that creates value, as I said, for the economy, for the society, and for the environment.
Yes, thank you so much, Cristina. Now I will move to here in the room to Ms. Castañeda Navarrete. You recently worked on a study, research, that studies sector level data for some of the main manufacturing countries in the world, both developing and developed, so a diversity of experiences there. Which implications can be drawn for gender equality and empowerment of women in the industrial sector from your study? And is there any difference between the experiences of industrialized and emerging or industrializing countries?
Thank you, Fernando, and good afternoon, Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I will just give a brief background of the report, and then I will link it to what it means for gender equality and women empowerment. The report really resonates with this revival of industrial policy and the importance of manufacturing. In the report, we analyze how sectors dynamics and the changes in the size of sectors, or in other words, structural change, influence national labor productivity growth. We found that in the last 2 decades, manufacturing was the main driver of productivity growth in economies such as China, Germany, Korea, and Taiwan province of China. In these economies, manufacturing sustains value-added shares of more than 20% of the total economy. And this explains why in these economies, manufacturing is the main sector driving productivity growth. For example, in the case of Taiwan province of China, manufacturing accounted for almost half of the labor productivity growth observed in the last 2 decades. It accounted for a third of the growth observed in Korea and China, and around a quarter of the productivity growth experienced in Germany. So what does this mean for gender equality and women economic empowerment? And here I will emphasize some of the messages that Dr. Cecilia Ocas already did. Although this is not always the case, higher productivity growth in manufacturing means that in general, manufacturing tends to have higher wages and better working conditions than other sectors that have lower productivity growth. The problem is that not everyone participates equally in these good quality jobs. As Cecilia already mentioned, in developing countries, women tend to be overrepresented in labor-intensive sectors such as food and beverages, apparel, textiles, and footwear, where wages and working conditions tend to be more precarious. Meanwhile, in developed countries, high-tech manufacturing tends to be male-dominated. There is also evidence that Cecilia was already mentioning of a positive association between technological upgrading and the defeminization of manufacturing employment. Among the 8 economies that we examined, this is particularly the case in China, where women participation, not only in manufacturing, but in the labor market overall, has decreased in the last 2 decades. Many factors contribute to these gender gaps in manufacturing, including the persistence of social norms that assign housework and care responsibilities as a primary task for women, gender bias that can be conscious or unconscious in recruitment and promotion processes, lack of affordable care services, which is a big issue in the United Kingdom, for example, and lack of flexibility that was already mentioned by Christina, how to make manufacturing jobs more accessible for women. So lack of flexibility that makes difficult not only for mothers but also for fathers to combine work in manufacturing with care responsibilities. In the report, we also found that although manufacturing tends to show faster productivity growth and higher productivity levels, its reduction in size has slowed down productivity growth. And the largest impact were observed among the economies that we examined in the United States and the United Kingdom. Less manufacturing employment means less opportunities for women to participate in these industries. So what happened? If there are less opportunities in manufacturing, then as manufacturing has reduced its employment shares, services have increased their participation in the economy. Human health and social work activities is one of the sectors that has expanded the most as a result of aging societies. And we saw this phenomenon among the countries that we examined, in particular, for example, in Korea, in the United States, in Germany, in France, in the United Kingdom. Worldwide, human health and social work activities is one of the most female-dominated sectors, and despite its high contribution to the society, it is characterized by low wages and precarious working conditions. Therefore, without gender transformative industrial policies, ongoing structural changes are likely to exacerbate gender segregation in the labor market. Finally, in the report, we also argued that some productivity strategies need to be based on granular knowledge of sector-specific dynamics. And again, making the point about the importance of data and gender disaggregated data. This need to have sector-specific or subsector-specific analysis for the case of manufacturing is also important. We need to collect and analyze gender disaggregated data at subsector level. Otherwise, we will miss the opportunity to address the deepening inequalities that we are already observing, because we don't really know where are these inequalities being deepened as it is happening. And obviously, all this structural change will be also influenced by the green and digital transformation that we are observing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, I see some of the ideas being taken by all the speakers of the role of gender equality in economic competitiveness. Beyond just say human rights or fairness issue, there's also an economic issue at play, and also the influence of these structural forces in the sector that have historically discriminated against women, and that need to be addressed by an active industrial policy, because just a gender-neutral industrial policy will never be able to solve this. So now I would like to move to Ms. Park, who's also online, yes. So my question to you is the following. South Korea is both an important producer but also consumer of plastic. During the last years, the country has made a lot of efforts to reduce this use of plastics and move toward a circular economy for plastics. In this context, what does gender equality and the empowerment of women have to do with the circular economy and these industrial practices towards more gender green industries? And how can the policies ensure that the transition to circular economy doesn't leave anyone behind and is fair and provides opportunities?
Thank you for your question. Can you hear me well? And can you see my slides?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my great honor to share this exploratory case study, which we examine the gender issues along the plastic value chain and also plastic circular economy. Actually, you just asked a question about this issue. Actually, there are a lot of discussions about the circular economy, lots of policy, and we especially talk a lot about environmental sustainability of circular economy. But what I found that, the impact of circular economy on the social issues, the social sustainability of circular economy has been largely underexplored. So in this case study, we wanted to see the nexus between gender and circular economy. And then in examining that, we use two different frameworks. Especially the first one, in examining the nexus between gender and plastics value chain and plastic circular economy. We wanted to examine how this plastic and its circular economy impact men and women in different way. And second, we also want to know how men and women play different roles in the transition to circular economy. And also regarding gender equality, we wanted to examine three different perspectives. First one is fixed numbers. Actually, this is the most widely accepted concept of gender equality. So basically, we examine the participation of men and women, for example, in the decision-making process in terms of numbers. And second, it's the fixed institutions. So not only the numbers, we also need to broadly understand how gender equality is promoted and practiced within the broader institution through institutional policies and institutional environment. And the third one is fix the knowledge. It is also called gendered innovation. And this refers to an effort to consider gender characteristics in the innovation process, in the research and development process, to ensure that the result and outcome of innovation, such as technology, product, and service, whether this benefits both men and women equally. So I think considering this gender innovation is also very important, not only considering about this number aspect of gender equality. So in this case study, we first examined the share of female workforce, especially in the sectors along the plastic value chain. And we especially examined three different sectors. The first one is the manufacturing of plastic resins. And the second one is manufacturing of plastic products. And the third one is about waste management. So the collection, treatment, and disposal, especially related to plastic waste. And as you can see in this graph, you can see the share of female workers in these three sectors along the plastic value chain are especially lower than the national average. So it ranges between 13% to 29%, while the national average is 42%. So you can see that especially these industrial sectors are male dominated. We further analyzes the physical and chemical risk perceived by male and female workers in the three sectors in the plastic value chain. And as you can see in this table, a lot of different types of physical risk, such as vibration, noise, temperatures, and so forth. And also the chemical risk, like, for example, inhalation of dust, inhalation of vapor, handling of chemicals, and so forth. These risks are mainly perceived by male workers, but for the risk related to the seated posture and repeated hand and arm movements, it's mainly reported by female workers. So especially across the three sectors, you can see male workers and female workers, they are handling different types of tasks. So for example, in the occupational safety and health policy, we need to consider not only the numbers of workers, but also the type of work they do, which will determine, for example, the different physical risk and also the different exposure pathway to different chemicals. So we need to consider these gender characteristics in the occupational safety and health policy. But in Korea, we don't have yet incorporated this to the occupational safety and health policy, which needs to be improved. And as for the chemical risk, we also need to consider the impact from the plastic additives. For example, the BPA and phthalate, which is a representative EDC, the endocrine disrupting chemicals. So this implies that it have different impact on men and women because, men and women have different hormone systems and so forth. So but we could not find a lot of studies, like scientific studies, that really shows this different impact of these specific chemicals on men and women. And a bigger problem is that we don't even know what kind of specific chemical substances are used as an additive. As an example, for example, the European Chemical Agency, they try to develop the list of these plastic additives, what kind of additives are used, especially in huge amount in European Union. They could only did it in 2018. And then, we don't even know, what kind of health impact it has, because it requires the further information about the toxicity and exposure studies. So regarding the chemical management policy, we also need a lot more studies that investigated the gender disaggregated studies that investigated the health impact of these many different additives on men and women's health. We also examined the role of men and women in the transformation to circular economy. We especially look into 4 different areas. For example, their role in large corporations, their role in startups, their role in civil society, NGOs, and their role as a policy decision maker. But here I wanted to share with you one example, the startups. For startups, we found 129 cases, and then we especially examined, what types of business models they use, and we also examined whether that's led by men or women. And then as you can see, across different business model, we found different patterns. For example, for zero-waste shopping, we found 73 cases, and then 82% of the cases were owned by women. So it's largely led by woman representative. For green products, especially if that's related to like fashion products, and if that really use recycled materials, then we also found that it's led more by women leaders. But for startups related to bioplastics or startup related to waste collection, waste management and treatment, which especially uses the artificial intelligence technology, a lot of the companies are owned by men. So we see, these kind of different characteristics, and this implies that when we promote circular economy strategies, we also need to consider these different gender characteristics so that we can think of who to mobilize, who to empower to really initiate and scale up our circular economy efforts. Although eventually we need to pursue that all these circular economy transition, either men and women, we have to play equal roles eventually. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Park. I found very interesting how, beyond the difference introduced by social norms, gender biases, and skills, and all the other factors that we have talked about, there's also even something as crucial as occupational safety and health impacts that also has an effect on how women and men participate differently in industries. And of course, that should be also inform policy. So I will now move to a second round of questions. But since we're running out of time, I will ask, please, our experts to provide a very short answer in 2-3 minutes only, so we can finish on time. And I will start here in the room with Ms. Castañeda Navarrete. For this second round, I would like to move into these kind of 2 mega trends that will transform industry and could further affect women's participation in the sector. And one of them, of course, is the digitalization, AI, and these advanced production technologies. So these phenomena, of course, have the potential to create a lot of opportunities, but they also could exacerbate existing inequalities, including and ensuing discrimination in the labor market. What are the key challenges and opportunities that you see in this regard for the manufacturing sector?
Thank you, Fernando. Yeah, I mean, what we see is that obviously digital technologies are making work more flexible. These are opening opportunities for women to participate in the labor market. Also, they are opening like new business models, and this is creating opportunities for women to own their own businesses. However, as it has been emphasized in this session, without changes in gender norms, this flexibility can mean just like more precarious working conditions and heavier burdens of unpaid care and domestic work for women. The digital transformation can boost women-led firms' productivity. However, women tend to have less access to both digital technologies and finance. And from a report that we are working in collaboration with UNIDO and with the Western Research Institute, what we found, we mapped different initiatives related with the adoption of digital technologies in manufacturing that were supporting particularly SMEs. And what we found is like very few programs supporting firms to adopt digital technologies in manufacturing have a gender transformative of either a gender sensitive approach. And in this report, we're going to feature the couple of examples that we identified that were following this approach. While digital technologies have the potential to improve working lives, as it was already mentioned, for example, in terms of safety risks, women have been traditionally excluded in the design and the development of technologies, and this exclusion is compounded by the fact that usually men, in particular white men, have seen as the norm in medical and engineering design fields. As a result, for example, work equipment tends to be less effective in safeguarding women, and as it was mentioned also before, we know less about the risks that women are exposed in their work environment. And in particular, in the case of artificial intelligence, there are very interesting and promising applications aiming at preventing and tracking gender-based violence in social media, for example, and tracking gender balance in conferences. However, there are also many risks involving the design and the use of AI applications, which are based on data that reflects the gender bias that exists in our societies. And I will just conclude saying that we need to rethink the skills development initiatives. Women are less likely than men to follow a linear path in their careers. Stereotypes that technology and engineering are men's domains can discourage girls and women to enroll in these fields, but they may find later in their lives that actually these were fields that they wanted to pursue. And as it was discussed in the previous session, regardless of the context, skills shortages is one of the main barriers for companies to adopt digital technologies. And closing the gender gaps in this area will unlock the full potential of women, but also enable companies to deepen their digital transformation. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. Ms. Oyon, also the science, innovation, technology is also very at the heart of your work. How do you see policy instruments countering the gender divide in science and technology? And do you have any specific examples that you can highlight?
Well, this is one of the key issues now that we have is how to increase the number of women, girls, in principle, in science and technology fields. In our case, we try to promote, of course, there is a part of activity very much related with the education field. In our case, that our main stakeholders are companies, not education institutions. What we also try to do is to promote through our mechanisms to support research and development projects the incorporation of women. And we do it in two ways. So on the one hand, in a relationship that we have with companies to give subsidies to fund the research and development projects, we analyze, and we have one of the evaluation criteria that we have is the on the one hand the incorporation of female researchers in the research teams, but also how the project takes into account gender issues. So we in these two ways we are trying to make at least in the research projects that we are funding or co-funding, we try to promote the on the one hand we try to disseminate good practices and to promote the incorporation of women in the proposals of projects and in our day-to-day with the companies that are working in this area. This is something that is always in our speeches as today. So this is the way that we have, because it's not really it's clear that we need in the case of science and technology, we need to invest in the education area, and we have to work very close to education institutions. But regarding industrial policy, what we see that we can do is to promote it, at least in the mechanisms that we have to promote the industrial policy, in our case, based in science and technology projects.
Thank you very much, Cristina. Now moving to Ms. Park. I thought it was, well, at least I haven't seen a lot of studies of the relationship between circular economy and the roles of men and women. So I found this very interesting. And here there are a lot of players active. We have the big corporations, as you mentioned. We also have a very active startup community. We have a lot of research, active research on these, civil society organizations promoting this. How do you see these different actors working together and building effective partnerships to promote gender just circular economy in that field?
So as I mentioned, in order to understand the connection between gender and circular economy, I especially think about two different perspectives. The first one is how the outcome of circular economy, how that can benefit both men and women equally. And the second perspective is how the process of the circular economy transition, how we can consider the gender characteristics, for example, in mobilizing and really scaling up the circular economy transition. So especially for the latter perspective, we examine the role of men and women in 4 areas, as I mentioned. So the first one is the role of men and women in large corporations. Actually, here we examine ESG report of some of the representative companies in Korea in the plastic industry. And then we especially could see, for example, the statistics about the gender diversity according to positions, according to levels. And then we found out that especially the Korean companies we have a lot of things to improve. So our numbers are fall behind, for example, compared to large multinational corporations in other countries, the leading companies. So there are definitely a lot of work needs to be done, although companies are working on it because they have to, share and report the information about their gender diversity. And some of the companies are considering, for example, revealing more information about even, what are they doing in order to increase the gender diversity according to the Bloomberg Gender Equality Index, for example. But we are not only working on improving gender diversity in the workplace, but we also need to start to improve the gender diversity in STEM education and also the career development. We also look into the role of men and women in startups. I showed you the simple result. So we see different patterns, like female tend to show leadership in some of the areas like zero waste shopping and recycling, while male tend to dominate the technology-led businesses, such as bioplastics and artificial intelligence-based waste management and so forth. So we should consider really these characteristics because this really shows that men and women have different interests, different expertise. So we really need to consider this to promote the circular economy efforts. But at the same time, I think we also need to be careful not to really fix the role. So, for example, this is the role of woman, this is the role of man. Um, we should really not to go there, but try to involve everybody for the inclusive transformation of circular economy. And also, we need to think about how to remove any potential barriers for women being leaders, and try to provide like tailored supports for really supporting this startup efforts. And also for civil society, we found out that it's especially female who actively participated in like civil activities such as plugging, for example. While they do jogging, they also collect like plastic waste. So it's like more than 80% are female. Um, but we also figured out that even though it's started, more women started these activities, as time goes by, they bring their friends, they bring their family members. So we can also see that more men involved in this kind of activities. I think we should also promote this kind of involvement, across different areas, not only for the civil society. And finally, for the policy decision making, we examine, for example, the policy proposal related to circular economy, whether that's made by congressman or congresswoman. And then we figured out that relatively more policy proposals were made by congresswomen. Maybe because women are more interested in these issues like recycling, environmental protection, and so forth. Maybe this can be a potential opportunity. So maybe we can take advantage of this and try to promote more actively the promotion of circular economy um, in the decision-making process. And eventually more project goes on. And when we try to scale up the circular economy transformation, we can also focus more on also improving the gender diversity in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving to Ms. Chetty. So designing gender transformative policy is, well, I will not say is the easy part, but let's say is relatively under control of the authorities. There's a lot of information out there. But then when facing the implementation, this can become a completely different issue. What were the key steps that you have observed when moving from this gender-sensitive policy formulation to the actual implementation, and if there's any lesson that you would like to share with us?
Thank you. I think the biggest challenge we experienced was that policy formulation does not sit in a single place. It cuts across all different government departments, but also it cuts across in terms of the private sector. So it took special effort in ensuring, firstly, that the policy was gender responsive, but more importantly, that there were gender responsive budgets that enables policy to be able to be translated into implementation. And I think usually in every country, that's the greatest challenge, is having budgets to accompany policy development. So accountability and oversight for gender mainstreaming is cross-cutting, and it definitely requires all organizations to come together and ensure that it's integrated not only into their business plans, but also their budgeting processes. It is truly everyone's responsibility, and all interest groups and authorities also needs to be kept in check to ensure that there is integration between the two. So advocacy groups for the demands of women in green industries, such as women's networks and renewable energy sectors, was supported and encouraged. Incentivizing women-owned businesses, particularly in green industries, helps to encourage women to become more active in these areas. And I think sometimes the challenge is not that there aren't enough initiatives. It's the fact that all of these initiatives are happening in a very fragmented basis. And if you pool all of these initiatives together and you pool all of these resources together, it increases the impact with regards to implementation and ensuring the economic participation of women, not just in the green economy, but across all economic sectors. So I think for us, that is the biggest challenge, is ensuring that there is gender responsive budgeting, but also that you hold people accountable to implementation and making sure that you have plans in place to be able to monitor and evaluate the implementation and making sure that they reach their milestones and are able to deliver on what was expected in terms of the policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chetty, and everyone for your great insights, your experience, and the lessons that you have shared with us. I think it's very important, this concept that, yes, gender is cross-cutting, but that also means that you need to involve all the different actors from different places when designing gender-sensitive policies and instruments like the ones you mentioned, gender-responsive budgets or gender-based programs could be a good solution to follow. Unfortunately, we started a bit late, so we're now running a bit. We run out of time, so there will not be time for a round of questions. But if there's any please share with us any questions or any additional request for information. Share with us, and we will make sure to share with the experts and get you a response. So with that, we close the session. Thank you very much for the experts here in the room or virtually for the great insights. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ziyong Zhou, the Deputy to the Director General of UNIDO and Managing Director of the Directorate of Technical Cooperation and Sustainable Industrial Development, to close the forum. Mr. Zhou.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates and experts, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you all. Allow me first to express my gratitude to all speakers and participants for their valuable contributions and insights during the inaugural edition of UNIDO's Multilateral Industrial Policy Forum. Through all this event, we had a fruitful discussion on the future of industrial policy and the possible solutions to the challenges we face today. I'm pleased that the forum provided a platform for thought-provoking reflections on these issues and encouraging participants to share their ideas and experiences. We at UNIDO are actively collaborating with our member states to address the challenges this era of multiple crises has brought upon us. We have intensified our efforts to support members developing countries in designing and implementing effective industrial strategies to achieve structural transformation. Through our technical cooperation programs and initiatives, we are working to strengthen our member states' capacity in developing effective business and policy solutions. We aim to promote the development of sustainable and inclusive industries that can generate jobs, increase incomes, and foster economic growth. Distinguished delegates and experts, as we come to the end of this first edition of the forum, I would like to reflect on some of the key takeaways from the interactive learning sessions. When discussing industrial policies for energy efficiency, we learned that there are important synergies between environmental and economic objectives. Promoting energy efficient practices is consistent with firms' competitiveness. This means that industrial policies can simultaneously support the achievement of SDG 9 on industry and SDG 12 on energy. In the session of green hydrogen, we learned that there exists a huge potential in this energy source to support the green transition. However, we need the policies to ensure that the potential benefit from the application of the new source of energy reach local communities as well. This could be achieved via the creation of a vibrant industry sector around this source of energy. When discussing industrial policies for digitalization, we learned that advanced manufacturing is a journey, not a fixed target. It takes time for learning and for absorption of the new technologies. For this journey to start, industrial policies should support the creation of a suitable industrial ecosystems to foster the diffusion and adoption of digital technologies by local firms, especially SMEs. Public-private partnerships are crucial. When discussing gender, just conclude, when we learn that gender-responsive industrial policies has the potential to support women's access to clean energy, digital transformation, and innovation. But for this, we need to continue to raise awarenesses, create the necessary framework, and to provide incentives for the adoption of gender transformative industrial policies. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the insights gained from these discussions offer an opportunity to enhance UNIDO's policy advisory services. As government require new tools and methodologies to guide the formulation and the implementation of industrial strategies, UNIDO can play a critical role. We have the analytical functions to document best practices, identify policy instruments to help countries achieve their industrialization targets. At UNIDO, we are committed to exploring more agile mechanisms to deliver industrial policy advisory services. An excellent example of this is the Global Industrial Policy Facility, which was recently implemented in collaboration with the German Cooperation Agency. Promoting industrial development in our member states requires upgrading the analytic and operational skills of policymakers. Capacity development is therefore a significant component of our efforts. Most importantly, let me remind to all distinguished participants to this forum that our work does not end today. Through a continuous engagement with you, our member states, we aim to improve future editions of the MPF. Building on the lessons learned from this inaugural edition, I would like to invite those willing to partner with us to come forward. We are currently creating an advisory committee for the forum, which will help us make the MPF an international reference for open and objective debates on global trends affecting industrial policy and for exchange concrete initiatives to foster industrialization at different levels of development. Excellencies, allow me to conclude by thanking each and every one of you for the valuable discussions we have had over the past day and a half. These discussions have provided us with a better understanding of what is at stake and the specific courses of action on industrial policy issues and their implication for the achievement of the SDGs. We must continue to promote networks and partnerships to enable the exchange of information to foster industrial cooperation at the regional and global levels. UNIDO is committed to supporting international efforts in achieving this goal. Let us continue working together towards a better, more equitable world. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. So I maybe should, Cristiano, please come to along. It's not the closing of this. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for all the time you spent with us in the last 2 days. Has been a very interesting journey for us. So we have listened many interventions thought-provoking reflections and everything. It's been a pleasure to provide this platform for all the member states, and we are really looking forward to continue this endeavor. Thank you, obviously, to my team, the team of the Division for Capacity Development, Industrial Policy Advice and Statistics, for having framed all programs, interventions, and support. Thank you very much.